Okay, folks, welcome to Grammar Wednesday. Never done this kind of thing before in my life. Feels very strange, very weird. So I'm just going to pretend that we're back at the school. We're in our classroom, and I got some tunes going on. Starting the day with Donovan Woods, this beautiful little song called "I Ain't Never Loved No One." And one of the reasons I wanted to get it going was because it kind of fits the theme of what I'm going to talk about for the next little bit. It's a song that I think would set the tone for the class, provide us with a nice little vibe. Beautiful little song, so it's going to play in the background as I sort of get us going here. Let me give you a quick little tour of what I got, where I am. I'm in my house here, in my little kind of computer family room here, and see if you can take a look at where I live. This is our little family room area right here. That's a living room area right there. There's the kitchen. This is where I sit right here, usually doing all my marking every night. Right there, that little sort of islandy thing. So anyway, let's get going. I'm just going to I'm talking into my phone, by the way. I don't have a camera in my computer, so this is all going to be by phone. Anyway, what I wanted to start off with, I got a few things. I wanted to start off with talking about the idea of writing with vulnerability. Vulnerability, it's something that we don't talk about a lot. It's if you're not sure what the term is, it's kind of got to do with the who we are, what makes us human. The idea of some people consider it to be almost like a weakness, something to do with human frailty. John Prine died last week, and I wrote about that last Grammar Wednesday. And after he died, I went online and I was reading a lot of comments. People were writing their sort of eulogies about John Prine. And somebody commented about how they got advice from John Prine. It was a songwriter, I forget who it was, but he asked John Prine, what's the key to being a successful songwriter? And John Prine said just two words. He said, be vulnerable. And it stuck with me. And I thought, yeah, that's what I see in the best writing I get from my kids. When I say my kids, I mean you guys. That's what I see. I see the humanity. I see people who aren't afraid to tell the truth, people who aren't afraid to open up, and because that's where the connection lies. Nobody cares about all the accomplishments and all the amazingness and all the great stuff. It's like good for you if you're writing about all your heroic achievements. What really binds us, what makes us connect, I think has a lot to do with honesty and vulnerability, and us going through the process of peeling back a few layers and revealing to the world our humanity. And that's, I think, what great writers do. That's what John Prine did. That's why he was such a great songwriter. I see zero difference between writing a writer's craft piece, writing any great piece of writing, whether it's fiction, nonfiction, songwriting, poetry. It's all the same to me when it comes down to the approach. And the approach, I think, has to center on that idea of revealing who we are and going in search of it. So I got thinking about this last night when this was running through my head, and what really struck me was my best friend. His name's Chris. He's a teacher in the Peterborough area, and I might have talked about him before with some of you guys. But Chris is he's a great guy. I've been best friends with him for decades now, since we were young, and he's someone who he's sort of my go-to guy when it comes to anytime I've got to talk to somebody seriously about any decisions, or anytime that I'm unsure about something, I talk to Chris, and I'm his go-to guy too. We edit each other's pieces of writing, and we're just really really good friends. Anyway, one of the things I want to talk about with Chris was this. He was many years ago. He was dating a woman. He was single at the time, obviously. He's dating a woman who was actually in the healthcare field, and she was very nice. I only met her once or twice, but she seemed very nice. Lovely person. She was just she had it all together. She had everything going for her. And they went out for, I think it's about 6 months. And one day Chris told me that they broke up. And I asked him, what was it? And he talked for a little while and he landed on something that I thought was really telling. He said she had no vulnerability. He said she was too together. Her life was almost perfect. And she was someone who didn't struggle with anything. And he just felt intimidated, but he also felt a lack of human connection. So he ended that relationship, and it always struck me because what got me thinking was they didn't connect, and they didn't connect because maybe they had the same taste in movies and books, or maybe they had fun together and they went skiing, but they didn't have that connection that two people share because they're revealing who they really are to each other, and they're talking about their doubts, their fears, their struggles, the way we feel socially awkward, all these things. They are the things that bind us. They are the ties that bind. And my buddy Chris, he's someone who, I love that about him. He is someone who wears his vulnerabilities on his sleeve. He doesn't pretend to be somebody else. Those of you who've read Margaret Lawrence's Stone Angel, you'll sort of see the secret of the world that Margaret Lawrence puts forward is the idea of discovering who you really are and being that person and not being afraid to speak the heart's truth. Our culture doesn't necessarily celebrate that, but I think it should. And that's what my buddy Chris does. He's very honest. He's very interested in other people. He wants to talk honestly and openly with people. He's got a natural curiosity. He is very, very funny. But everything about this guy comes down to his humanity and not his greatness. He's this. And when we were younger, especially, he was a sort of tall, red-headed, good-looking guy, but he never saw himself as someone who was anything special. He always was that kind of dorky dude from Scarborough who was just muttering along like the rest of us. So the vulnerability is something that I wanted to sort of talk about with him. I saw it really clearly at both of his parents' funerals. A number of years ago, his dad died, then a few years later, his mom died, and Chris delivered the eulogy at both. And in both cases, he delivered speeches that he'd written that were beautiful. They were just wonderful. And he was mostly talking about his parents' humanity and who they were, not what they accomplished. And that's how he sees the world. It's all about the reveal. And I think that is key in writing. You've been trained by a school system to argue, persuade, try to convince. Who cares? I don't. If I don't read another 5-paragraph essay or persuasive essay or argumentative essay again in my life, I'll consider myself fortunate. I'm sick of them. I couldn't care less about them. I'm thoroughly curious about and interested in people's stories, and especially when they reveal who they really are and what they've been dealing with, and those vulnerabilities come about. About 2 weeks ago, I guess about 3 weeks ago now, at the beginning of all this COVID thing, Chris sent me a big, long, detailed email outlining his fears about dying because he's diabetic and he's in his 50s and he feels vulnerable, and he's not scared to death, and he's not overblown about this, but he was writing about his fears. He was writing about how he's got 2 young teenage daughters. They're grade 8, grade 10. He was talking about how he's been drifting from them lately because they're teenagers, and it's the kind of thing that he was he was free to open up about. He was writing about it openly, and it was interesting. and it captured my attention, and it was revelatory in that it revealed a great deal about who he was. It's not easy to do it. Most people are afraid to do that. They don't want to go there. It's difficult. It's awkward. It's scary. But I think if we don't mind that sort of territory of our psyches, we're gonna pay for it later in the form of big bucks to therapists. The reveal, the vulnerabilities, they come out. Something just popped into my head. My daughter Molly just walked in the door, and I remember Molly, say hi. Anyway, Molly walked in the door, and what hit me was about 7 or 8 years ago. Molly was maybe, I guess, about 9 years old, and she was out with Chris. She was out for a walk here in Bracebridge. Chris and his daughters were visiting, and Chris's youngest daughter, Cassie, who at the time would have been, I guess, about 9 years old, same as Molly, 8 or 9. She said to Molly, they were talking about how they feel more like cousins than friends. And Cassie said to Molly, yeah, she said, we're sort of like cousins because our dads are gay for each other. And what I loved about that was my kids and Chris's kids were seeing that, they're seeing the bond that Chris and I share. And but also because of that idea of being genuine with each other and not being afraid to reveal and those vulnerabilities. So I want to encourage you to continue along those lines with your writing. If you've been doing it, and if you haven't, take a shot at it. I think pretty much all of you have, and you do it well. But I think that's where the action is in this kind of writing especially. I think it's something that serves you well when you're debating, should I go there? The answer should be yes. When you're debating about, how far do you drill down? Well, you keep going. And then you keep going until you think you've done it justice, whatever the issue is. It's one of the reasons why I love our bulletin board. Some of you have posted some beautiful pieces there, and I want to encourage you to post some more. I'm in the dark here. I feel like a one-way street kind of operator where I don't know if anybody's reading those. I'm getting very little feedback from you guys. Some of you throw me little things on your pieces, which is great. At the bottom, I love that. Or you throw little comments in. Colby McRoberts, Colby can't get through something without talking to me, and I appreciate it immensely. A few others of you do it too, but most of you don't. But feel free to. It's nice to sort of feel like we're in touch. Anyway, to wrap up that vulnerability talk. You've probably never noticed this, but at my desk in our writer's room, right behind it, I've got a red poster, and there's the words on it from Ernest Hemingway. It's a quote from the author, Ernest Hemingway, and it says, "Write hard and clear about what hurts." And that sort of bookends my talk here about John Prine with his Be Vulnerable, and Ernest Hemingway, write hard and clear about what hurts. And don't be afraid to reveal. Don't be afraid to go there with your stories. Don't think that you're the first person to write about this or you write about that. Usually what you're going to discover is you're going to write something that a lot of people are going to say, yeah, I get that. I've been there. But it's crucial with good writing. Okay, next item. Next item is I want to talk to you guys about the editing process. Now that you're not doing much in the way of peer editing, I'm going to ask you to do something that I think is crucial. Proofread more. Many of you are doing a great job with it. A few of you are writing something and throwing it my way, and I'm fixing 83 things when I would probably only change 17 if you proofread it a couple of times and if you fiddled around with it a little bit more. So I want to ask you guys to do the best you can in the proofreading and the polishing and the editing process. And sometimes it's best to leave your piece of writing for an hour or two and go back to it, and then sometimes do it again. Along those same lines, I really, really, really hope you guys are checking out the edits and changes I'm making on your pieces and not just throwing it back at me without doing that. I've had a couple of you do it where I've written stuff in the middle and in big capital letters, and I get it back the next draft, and my big capital letters are still there in 7 different places. It suggests to me that you basically just didn't bother looking at it again, or didn't bother tracking the changes. You track those changes, and that's really where the growth is as a writer. Where you take a look and go, oh, I should have reorganized the sentence, or yeah, I see why he did this, or yeah, he got rid of those words, I see why, or I keep spelling this wrong, or I keep doing some little glitchy thing. Most of you are pretty good, but I really, really want to make a pitch to ask you to do a just a more detailed job with that, and it's something that I appreciate immensely, especially when I've got tons of stuff coming at me, and I've got almost 90 students right now, and I'm sitting in front of my computer hours on end, and I'm just trying to keep up with everything, and it's been fun. I'm glad, and I love it that so many of you have written a lot. It's great. I want to encourage you to. It's wonderful, but it certainly makes life a lot easier if if you've polished and proofread and all that. Next item, one of you wrote a piece that I did an edit on earlier this afternoon and earlier today, and it was I can't remember if it was called this, but there's a line in it that I loved, and I want to pitch it as a writing idea. The line is this. The line was, "It felt like love." I love that that sentiment, because you can go in about 10 different directions with it. Depends if you want to italicize felt. It felt like love, or it felt like love with the ... ellipsis after it, a little more whimsical. But think about that as a writing prompt. It could be sweet, it could be lovely, it could be about being duped. It could be a lot of things, but it might be something worth your while. It's making me want to write a piece along those lines as well. What else? I'm gonna post a little grammar thing for you. I want you to just take a look at it, and it'll take you about maybe 5 or 10 minutes. Mostly about punctuation stuff that I keep harping on, but it's something that I do think is worth your while to at least see how you're doing with that. Along those lines, one little sort of glitchy tip thing I want to talk about. Whenever you're writing something like "We went to the Browns' house for dinner," or the Johnsons dropped over, or whatever, no apostrophes there. I've been seeing that a lot lately, and it's one of those small things. I just want you guys to not use that apostrophe unless you're showing contraction. Can't, wouldn't, shouldn't, or that word owns something. So Ray's pen, Jen's hat. So it's one of those things where just try to make sure you get that down. So the 6-sentence test thing I'm going to put on, another one of those things. I'll post that for you. So I'm just reading here. I'm also going to post a piece that I want you to read that goes along with the vulnerability idea. It's a piece called Stars by a girl I taught a few years ago. Her name's Emily, and she's a beautiful, beautiful writer. And you might not be thrilled with this, but she wrote about her experience at prom. Which is a sore spot with a lot of you, because who knows what prom's going to look like this year. We don't know. We don't know what's going on with all that stuff. But if you can just get past that and read the piece, it's beautiful, and it's unlike any other prom type piece I've ever read. And I imagine it'll grab your attention, and you'll see the beautiful writing in it. Mostly, I want you to read it because it's good, honest, vulnerable writing. But it's a lovely piece, and I think it'll just make you smile, and I think you'll like it. It's cool. I just want to make a final pitch. If you could send more stuff for the bulletin board, I'd appreciate it. I'm just going to have faith and assume that people are reading all that stuff, that people are clicking on it. I'm counting on you guys being bored. I'm counting on it being 1 a.m. and you can't sleep because you didn't get out of bed till 1 p.m. and you're kind of bored, so maybe you read some of that stuff. And if you do, send some messages to people, even if you don't know them. It's I think it's just a really, really nice thing to do. Okay, I'm going to wrap it up. I know I'm no Galbraith when it comes to this thing. I don't have a whole lot in the way of bells and whistles, but that was almost 20 minutes, so I think that's good enough. Hope you guys are all doing well, and I'll touch base with you soon. Okay, bye-bye.